for joining us this evening. My name again is Megan Lopez, and I am a board member for Old Pueblo Archaeology Center, the Tucson, Arizona nonprofit organization that is bringing you this third Thursday Food for Thought presentation. For tonight's Third Thursday program, Old Pueblo is delighted to welcome our guest presenter, Miss Reylynne Williams. Ms. Williams is Akimel O'Odham, an enrolled member of the Gila River Indian Community, which is also known as the GRIC, G-R-I-C. She resides in Co-op Village in the western part of the GRIC. Reylynne says she enjoys attending Akimel O'Odham classes, language classes, and cross-stitching to calm her mind. Recently, she also started taking basket weaving classes. Reylynne has a master's degree in Indigenous Peoples Law and a bachelor's degree in anthropology. After 19 years, having worked in the area of cultural resources and prehistoric preservation for the Gila River Indian Community, Reylynne was selected this year as that community's tribal historic preservation officer, a position equivalent to Arizona State Historic Preservation Officer. For some background on her presentation this evening, in the 1930s and again in the 1960s, archaeologists conducted extensive excavations at a place called Snaketown on the Gila River Indian Community lands. As a result of those investigations, archaeologists defined what they call the Hohokam archaeological culture. With little input from the Indigenous Akimel O'Odham, the river people of the Gila River Valley who know that Snaketown's ancient residents are their ancestors. The archaeologists did not dwell on Snaketown's connection with the Akimel O'Odham of the Gila River Indian Community. For this evening's presentation, Reylynne has invited us to go on a journey together, experiencing the life, sounds, and culture of the Akimel O'Odham in Snaketown. Welcome, Reylynne.
Let me get started sharing my screen. Sorry. Is it the right screen?
No, it shows the split view. I'm trying to think how we corrected this before.
It's I know we went through this.
Yeah, we had a planning session here before the start of the webinar.
There?
Yes,
Okay.
except that we have that black bar up near the top. If you can move that aside. Oh, it went back to. Okay, yeah, do slideshow from beginning there.
I couldn't see my notes. That was
You can use
Sorry.
it that way if you want, if you need to read your notes.
Well, I don't want people to read my notes. Sorry.
Okay, I have a couple of comments on the chat here from Life. He says presentation mode and try the icon in the lower right. That's from Suzanne.
Gosh.
Suzanne Grisette, I'm going to unmute you if you have a suggestion of how to do this. Sounds like you do. Let me find you here in the list. Okay, go ahead.
I had the same problem last night. And that first screen you showed, somebody came up from the audience and said, press this button down here, and it did it. So it was on the lower right-hand side. Like when you go back to the screen that has the,
So was that the presentation mode button?
I don't know, it was an icon.
Well, that's what Life says. Okay, let's give it a try here.
Can't, it's, how come it's not clear?
It'll clear up.
Aha. Down on the bottom right, whoops.
Okay, now we can see your full screen, but you probably can't see your notes, right?
She should be able to.
It's not. You're still seeing my notes?
No,
No, we're not seeing anything right now except a gray screen.
Still?
Yeah, now we have that split screen like we had before, showing your next slide and your notes.
Hmm.
This worked well when we were practicing.
Yeah, and I did exactly.
Now we have a big black rectangle in front of your slide. Now it went away. Can you see your notes now?
Sorry. I'm closing these windows.
Yeah, remember one more thing we can try. Go ahead and try to share again. Okay, I got a chat from Mary Jo. Says to click on the slide screen or slideshow on the upper left in Zoom. Not on from beginning. Wait a minute. On the tab, I think.
So weird.
Yeah, from beginning should work, but she can't see her notes if we do that, I don't think.
Mm-mm.
Okay, see if you can find that icon on the lower right, Reylynne. Somebody mentioned that. Okay, while you're there, yeah, click on the three dots there, show presenter view. You see your notes now?
do. Is the screen in the way?
Yeah,
Or it is?
yeah, it shows up as a black bar there in the middle. Andrew says it may not work in presenter view if you only have one screen. Isn't modern technology wonderful?
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for your patience.
Paula, you have a suggestion here about sharing a portion of the screen and adjusting the view for the audience so that her notes aren't visible to us. Paula, can I unmute you so you can tell her how to do that? Let me find you here in the list just a minute. Paula. Okay, Paula, you're on. You want to unmute?
I think I got it. Do you see the full presentation now?
We do. You see your notes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Let's go.
Sorry.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for all the help, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I know practice it, but always something. Good evening, Sapitath Kamnum. It is a pleasure to be here with each and every one of you this evening virtually. I want to begin with the following statement that the Hohokam Pima National Monument Village of Snaketown is located on the Gila River Indian Community, a sovereign nation with its own tribal laws, ordinances, and a protected site under federal and tribal laws. Therefore, access to the Hohokam Pima National Monument is restricted to tribal community members only, and that trespassing on the Gila River Indian Community is taken seriously and subject to prosecution. We are about to embark on a virtual journey to Snaketown. From my personal perspective as an O'odham woman from the Gila River Indian Community, there are videos embedded into this presentation, and you may need to adjust your volume accordingly. I will pause before speaking after the video plays to allow for volume adjustment. So let us begin. The Gila River Indian Community is home to the Akimel O'Odham and the Pipash. However, they are federally recognized as the Pima and Maricopa. They both come from separate ancestral groups, practice different traditional and religious ceremonies, speak different languages, sing and dance differently, and have different traditional stories. My mother once told me back in the old days, you could tell and distinguish between an O'odham woman and a Pipash woman was from their traditional clothing and how they were made and by the jewelry that they wore. Sorry, I had my phone on. As you can see in the historic and modern photographs here, the O'odham women are known to wear shell strands and or long beaded necklaces, while the Pipash wear a geometric beaded cape and or scarves. So the photograph on the bottom left, where the group of dancers are. Those are a mix, you know, of O'odham and Peepash community members celebrating the O'odham New Year. And the group photo on the right is a group of Peepash traditional singers and dancers. The traditional songs and dances conducted by the O'odham and Peepash are significantly different. O'odham social dancing moves in a counterclockwise motion, usually circling the O'odham singers or in front of the singers. The O'odham singers can be men and or women, and they'll either use a shafkud, a gourd rattle, or a basket, or a cardboard box. The Peepash singers consist mostly of men of varying ages, and the women will dance in multiple lines facing the singers. And so this is just an introduction of who the Akimel O'Odham and the Peepash are.
The circle dance that apparently inspired this art form survives today among the Pima Indians. These Indians believe themselves to be the descendants of the Hohokam, a view which is supported by many of the archaeological findings. The Pimas were well established where they now are when first seen by Europeans in the 16th century. Their way of life, including dependence upon irrigated agriculture, reflects a long residence in the desert and an intimate familiarity with its landmarks. For example, specific mountains are deeply woven into Pima mythology. The basket dance performed by Pima ladies is a revival of an old festive dance. It is a good example of the slow and measured steps that characterize the Pima dance style. This gay occasion at Snaketown was sponsored by the Gila River Indian Tribal Council.
So this short clip is from a YouTube video from the old film preservation on the 1969 Snaketown Gila River Indian Community archaeological excavation. I don't know if anybody is aware of this video, but our office is aware of this video, and I just want to ensure that people know that it's possible that this video may have human remains in the video. So with this video, you know, it's just, I just wanted to emphasize, you know, the basket dancing, and that the narrator that has stated in the beginning, you know, that the O'odham people are descendants of the Hohokam, and Hohokam is ancestors, is the word for ancestor or those who have gone on before us, and the terminology Hohokam comes from archaeologist.
The circle dance.
So a quick overview of who the Hohokam and Batayan, and as descendants, as I'm a descendant of the Hohokam, the Peepash are the descendants of the Batayan. And this map just shows an overview of where the ancestral lands are for both of the ancestors, the Batayan and the Hohokam. And you can see that they're dispersed, you know, along the Colorado River, and from south of the Mogollon Rim into northern Mexico. And, you know, our ancestors had no concept of international boundary or territories. You know, they lived side by side, and as their descendants, we continue to live side by side here in the Gila River Indian Community, and as well as the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, who also has Peepash and O'odham. The Gila River Indian Community was established by executive order, and this is a earlier map of the 1859 for the Gila River Indian Reservation. And in the federal recognition, the community has expanded into its current boundary, which is 372,000 acres. And this is an old map showing the executive orders that expanded the community from 1859 all the way to 1915. But I do want to point out that over the last 10 years, the community has acquired new land and a few parcels of land have been put into trust. And so when future map comes out, the boundaries of the community will certainly change. And just to point out that, you know, through these executive orders, at the time, the federal government had issued many federal Indian policies trying to assimilate the Native Americans in the United States. And so here on the Gila River Indian Community, we had experienced various changes. And one of the changes that I wanted to point out was that the General Allotment Act that was passed in around the 1880s, which allowed the break of tribal land into allotted land, or what we would consider private land. So community members were given land throughout the community, and from District 1 to District 7. And so at the same time, each community member family, you know, were able to move across the community into their allotments. And so generally speaking, here, right around here, you know, is the village of Snaketown. And so a lot of the people that lived in this area, you know, they moved to different parts of the community, and whether community members had already lived in these areas, but other community members were given an opportunity to get land and farm. The ancestral connection to Snaketown, you know, it's right here on this map. It's situated on the northern banks of the Gila River within the respective District 4, which is referred to as the Stotonic Community. And Snaketown was infamous, you know, for the archaeology conducted in 1934-35 and 1964 and 65. expeditions, you know, but it wasn't the connection, you know, to the Akimel O'Odham wasn't part of that, part of the review, you know. I'm sure everybody is aware of Gladwin's book and Hari's book on Snaketown, and how they both, you know, really pinpoint the cultural material that came out of Snaketown, you know, really identifying the importance that Snaketown may have had, you know, in the Middle Gila Valley.
The selection of Snaketown as a place of exceptional importance in shedding light on the prehistory of the Southwest and of our nation. The high sides of the ball court made natural bleachers for the audience, just as they must have served the watchers of the ball game of old. Mr. Lloyd Allison, the governor of the Gila River Indian tribe, is about to accept a bronze plaque designating Snaketown as a registered National Historic Landmark. This ancient village was selected for recognition by the Secretary of Interior, Stuart Udall, upon the recommendation of the Advisory Board on National Parks, Historic Sites, Buildings, and Monuments.
So I know many of you are aware, you know, that Snaketown was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was decided at that time, you know, that Snaketown would have become a park, you know, that visitors could attend and walk around, you know, to look at the excavations and the ball court, the famous ball court, you know, something similar to Sidivaki or Sivanvaki, Casa Grande ruins, or Pueblo Grande and Shudak Movol, Mesa Grande, you know, but it never came to fruition. And I want to believe that there was a reason why it didn't become a park for visitation, is because of its significance to the community as an O'odham village. It is the O'odham view from the elders that have told me, was that we've always considered these places very significant, you know, to our people. And significance, I mean, that they're a place in the landscape that our people lived, where they thrived, where they took care of each other, and in that when they left this specific place, it's supposed to go back to the natural world, you know, go back to become dust. you know, and we never want to keep anything around because it shows that things change, you know, as we come and go in this world, whether we move out of town, move out of state. You know, the community has over 23,000 members. And wouldn't you know that there are community members who live in almost every single state in the United States? And that realization is that our people move for jobs. And part of the assimilation too was there was a self-determination and relocation, you know, where the United States want to break up a lot of our people and move them across the United States into Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. And that didn't happen for most of the O'odham people. Some of them stayed here in the valley while others moved away for better opportunities. But slowly, a lot of those people during that time are coming back. Their families are coming back to the community because of what we have, because of our growing economic ventures are allowing for the community members to come back. And so Snaketown, its archaeological significance, you know, that they pinpointed, it could have been over 2,000 people that lived in this village. And that's a lot of people. The trails that were on the landscape, you know, that went into Snaketown, those trails connected to all the other Hohokam villages in the middle, Gila, in the Salt River Valley, in down into Tucson, trails that lead out to the Gulf of California, or, you know, to the Pacific Ocean. This dedication of Snaketown, you know, the perspectives may have changed, you know, but we're the descendants now, where we're protecting it from visitation, you know, because it's it may be hard to put into words or explain why it's not any of the other national monuments here in Arizona, but, you know, just respecting the fact that the significance that this village had to the archaeological community just signifies what our Hohokam people had left behind.
The selection of Snaketown as a place of exceptional importance in shedding light on the prehistory of the Southwest and of our nation. The high sides of the ball court made natural bleachers for the audience, just as they must have served the watchers of the ball game of old.
I think that, oh. Okay, I see what happened. I played the video over again, sorry. So here is the plaque, you know, of Snaketown. There's an interesting story behind this plaque and how it was acquired. As you saw, that former governor Lloyd Allison Bott, you know, had accepted the plaque during its dedication. And for many years, nobody knew where this plaque was. None of the community members or officials, community officials, had no idea where this plaque was until one day a community member approached Barnaby Lewis, the former tribal historic preservation officer, that they had this plaque. One of the family members had it, not sure how, but it was returned, to the Hohokam Heritage Center so that it would be curated. And it was very interesting to have this plaque come out of the blue, and it also, I think, is a significance, that the community really doesn't want to show off, Snaketown. And I think another reason too is that, in modern times, there is a community cemetery, that's on the way to Snaketown. And because of the location of that historic modern cemetery, it's being so close to Snaketown, we want to pay respects, to the people who are there and to the families, who may continue to utilize that historic modern cemetery. And it would be improper and of the community to reopen Snaketown, for public viewing. But to be honest, the ball court is the only thing that remains visible along the landscape. But if you're driving down I-10, passing Goodyear Road, and you look off to the west, you will see mounds, dirt mounds off into the distance, and that is Snaketown. I know I've spoken with many people who have said, well, I look out there and I don't see anything. I can't tell. And it's like, well, maybe it's just telling you you're not ready to see it yet in the cultural landscape. But every time I drive down to Snaketown to work, I'm looking over there every day, every morning and every evening. I look across and I visualize what the prominent structures would have looked like in the day. And I'm glad that I'm still able to see it, see across the landscape. So I know that the archaeologists, had uncovered a lot of canals through Snaketown. And this is just one of the photographs of a canal. And everybody knows that the Hohokam are well known for their canal irrigation system. It's probably more well known in the Salt River Valley than in the Middle Gila, because our community is basically in the center of the Middle Gila Valley, and that a lot of that archaeological work is restricted information. And it's just the same, you know, as the Salt River Valley, in which the community had continued to use a lot of the prehistoric canals today. And in fact, the Pima Maricopa irrigation project was established because of the water rights the community had won in December of 2004, that they are responsible for upgrading the canal system throughout the community. And unfortunately, a lot of the agriculture that may have been near and around Snaketown no longer exists, you know, because the people who used to live there moved into different areas of the community. And so where the canal system is now continues to feed into a lot of the agricultural fields that may have been in use since our ancestral days, you know. And when we think about, I know there's many conversations, you know, about how did they make these canals? What tools did they use? What prompt them to use let's see, what prompt them to use, you know, ceramic sherds or old metates or manos or different rocks, different sized rocks to within the canal. Why did they do that? You know, was it just to help raise the water, or were they no longer using that canal and using it for trash? I don't know. You know, there's a lot of speculations of what materials they use to make these canals. And thinking and in the modern perspective, you know, now the photograph on the right is a modern canal, and in the community has a new project in which they're building solar panels over the canals to not only help with the precipitation, I believe that's the right word, I keep mixing the words up, but to help control how much water, you know, evaporates into the air. But the solar panels are also being built to help bring electricity to some of the irrigation pumps, and that way it takes off the pressure from the electrical system from the Gila River Utility Authority line that feeds into a lot of the irrigation pumps and the system. And so, you know, we have modern tools, modern technology, modern equipment to upkeep a lot of these canals, and they're slowly, you know, making the canals into cement lined canals so that there's no seepage through the canals. And the community is invested in creating managed aquifer reservoir, sorry. And these marsh sites are strategically placed in the Gila River, and the Pima irrigation system will feed into that aquifer, slowly rebuilding the water table beneath the community. And the community, you know, has one of the biggest water settlements here in Arizona, and that are, you know, with what's happening here in the Southwest with the climate change and global warming, you know, that the community had to negotiate the water allocation to remain within the Colorado River and Lake Powell, you know, because it's as the Southwest expands, more people move out here, and there's a greater need for water. You know, whether it's the United States expanding their technological advancements, you know, like Intel and the mining companies who need the water to mine copper, and now they're going into lithium, and you know, water has become important, you know, and how much will the community invest, you know, in the future of the water, you know, for the Southwest, but also what is the community going to do to invest in themselves to continue the agricultural way of life, you know, creating these solar panels over the canal system to offset electricity, cement lining the canals, and you know, those type of things. So definitely, you know, a difference between what our ancestors did at Snaketown and every and any other, you know, Hohokam village where the canal fit into the village, or throughout the communities to grow food. And you know, I have been told by my family, you know, my family were once farmers here in the west end of the community, and they received their water, you know, from the Salt River Project. And the people that lived in the village were my relatives, their relatives, their extended family, their cousins, their uncles, their sisters, their brothers. They all lived in the village here, and they would help each other farm their parcel of lands. You know, my great grandparents had 10 acres each of land side by side, and the family farmed it, and everybody in the community, in the village, would come to help, you know, whether it was planting, if it was watering or harvesting, or even preparing the land. That's how they were taught. And I'm pretty sure that's how it was across the community, and even during our ancestral times, where they all worked together, you know, whether they had relatives from the Hohokam Nation or Achinini community, they came out to help, you know, and in return, they were given a piece of the crop, you know, to live off of. And it was just a cycle, and that's how they did things back then, But today, you know, my family had stopped farming when my uncles and aunts and my mom, they grew up and left home to go back to school or to work, you know, and that's how some of the families may have made the transition from agriculture to working in the field, in town, you know, or somewhere, or and now, you know, coming back to the community to work. And these are some of the changes, you know, the life changes from our ancestral times to now, how we view things. But we know that it's important to continue our way of life, you know, of agriculture, of providing food to the community, and to the animals here that the people have.
Used approximately 30 Pima workers who now live on the Gila River Indian Reservation. They were most cooperative, understanding of our needs, and deeply interested in what they were doing. Payday was eagerly awaited. Here we see Job Hayes, the father of Ira Hayes, who was associated with the Iwo Jima flag raising incident during World War II.
You know, I always thought it was important, you know, to acknowledge the community members that had assisted the archaeologists with the Snaketown excavations, because they would know who at that time lived in and around Snaketown, and they may have been able to educate the archaeologists at that time about some of the canal uses, or some of the objects that they encountered, and the respectful treatment of our ancestors. And I thought it was really nice, you know, that in Howry's book, the 64-65 expedition, you know, that he acknowledges those community members who had assisted, and he had a photograph, you know, of the men who had helped and the women who had helped, and putting their names and acknowledging them, you know, because today within the cultural resource management program, we do have community members who are doing the archaeological work within the community and taking care of the work and taking care of the ancestors. And Dennis Williams, he was one of the community members that the Hohokam Heritage Center had done an interview with, of his experience at Snaketown. And he had told us that his grandfather, Jones Williams, had worked on the 1934-1935 Snaketown excavations, and his father, or grandfather, sorry, is the one who had encouraged him to join in the 1964 and 65 excavations. And he remembers meeting Howry, you know, and the other archaeologists, and he was a young man in 19 or 20 years old, and he remembers, you know, some of the conversations that that some of the archaeologists, you know, would talk about. And he didn't go into specific details about, you know, some of the conversations, but it was certainly an experience to listen to him share his experience, you know, as a young man working out in Snaketown. And there was another community member, Larry Lewis, and in speaking with Larry, he had indicated that there were families that still lived in Snaketown during the time of the excavations. And I want to say there was a photograph of a couple of adobe houses that was taken in the general area of Snaketown, but he recalls his family having lived near Snaketown, and that they had their own well that they got water from, and that couple of, I think 3, maybe 4 families, not a lot of families, but just a few that had lived a ways from him. And he doesn't recall why they all had to leave and move to different areas of Snaketown. But he remembers, you know, that people lived there, and that the elders, you know, told him that people used to live there. And that just shows that whether 2,000 people lived at Snaketown, there were still a few families that lived at Snaketown or in the vicinity of Snaketown.
Used approximately 30 Pima. This individual feature at Snaketown, the ball court. As seen today, the ball court is a large oval basin, almost as long as a football field. The sides are earthen embankments that once stood about 12 feet high. They were faced with clay plaster, and the floor was hard-packed clay, as we learned when half of the court was excavated in 1934. It must have been the center of much activity, social and perhaps religious, in this old Hohokam village. These men are running through it to demonstrate how spacious it is. It is called a ball court because it resembles in many features the ball courts of ancient Mexico and Central America. Accounts written by Spanish chroniclers who observed the game provide details of how it was played. From this information, we speculate that there were hoops in the sides of the Snaketown court and that a rubber ball was used in playing the game. 2 teams of players competed with each other, trying to be the first to bounce the ball off a player's body through the hoop. A shinny-like game is played today by Pima and Maricopa girls, a survival from early days, but not necessarily from the game played in the ball court. During this individual feature at Snaketown, the ball court.
So the Snaketown ball court, you know, is one of the main features at Snaketown. And, there's a lot of theories going around about what the ball court was used for, whether the O'odham had adopted the Mesoamerican game, ball game, or its uses, how, in the dedication video, they had people lined up on Snaketown while they did the dedication in the middle of the ball court. And there's various size ball courts throughout Arizona. And where I live about 3-4 miles from Villa Buena. And there's this very small ball court that's still up. And what my uncle had told me was that the elders would use that ball court to have meetings, village meetings there, or be a place to meet with the Peeposh people. That was before we have district community centers where we have meetings, places to go. But the Snaketown ball court, Larry remembers, Larry Lewis, the gentleman who participated in the excavation, he had remember as a kid playing on the Snaketown ball court and running around through the ball court. And I always wondered what it would be like to play Thaka. As the video mentioned, Thaka is a women's game where only women are allowed to play. And Thaka can be explained like a field hockey. It's a very aggressive game, but it's a lot of fun. I used to play Thaka, and the parameters of the game Thaka, you can, depending on who sets the field, there's really no boundaries. But I always imagine what it would be like to play in a ball court. The Hohokam Heritage Center, has a small ball court right in the center of the facility there, where they have events and storytelling, winter storytelling, and it has many purposes. And it may not just be for games, but it also could be for meetings, for gatherings, for bringing people together, celebrations, ceremonies, bringing in ceremonies that bring in the rain during the summer, or things like that. And the size of this ball court is big. And just imagining what activities had gone on there to bring not just people from the village of Snaketown, but to bring people from all surrounding villages. Because Snaketown wasn't occupied by itself, right? How can you picture a village of 2,000 people just occupying by themselves? Other villages were occupied at the same time throughout the landscape. and everybody had a reason to visit a village. You know, our people may have come down, you know, from the north and to visit family at Snaketown, you know, or, you know, family from the Tucson area may have traveled up to Snaketown, you know, to visit family or be a part of a ceremony or celebration. You know, there's a lot of uses, no matter how big or small, there was a use for them.
Individual.
And here's a current photo of what the ball court looks like, looking northeast towards Superstition Mountains and the Four Peaks. So we know that during the archaeology, you know, they encountered many Oraskis, roundhouses, and or more rectangular looking pit houses. And you know, I'm very fortunate, you know, that these photographs exist because there's not too many of the modern adobe houses still around. But it just depicts that how our ancestors lived, what they utilized as far as materials to make these homes. And I know that during in both of the books by Gladwin and Hari, you know, they always showed how the level of pit houses, how one pit house was built over another pit houses, and it could have been the same family, you know, that just grew. It's very common today that multiple families do live in one household, and the size of the household can change, you know, with additions to the houses, or maybe somebody passed away and they just moved the house a little bit over. You know, there's there could be a lot of that too, you know, or the family left to go live in one village for a season and then coming back to Snaketown and living there for another season. You know, our people were always moving seasonally. And I say that because when reading through some of the superintendent's letters, that they had to go out to some of the harvesting camps to document the people that were there at the harvest camp, you know, under the Dawes Allotment Act that brought out the Indian census and the rolls, the Dawes rolls, documenting all the people that they can get to, you know. So imagine the superintendents having to go from village to village to identify who the people are living there, and knowing they had to go out, you know, to the harvest sites to find the O'odham people. And we know that, of course, I personally believe that Snaketown cultural material really set the standard for the identifying the material types and the and their phases. You know, so many artifacts came out of Snaketown, And in the video, you'll see, and I think there's photographs too of the lab that had piles of ceramic sherds just out there in the back. And I'm like, oh my God, a nightmare. For today's, archaeologists and that work in the lab, they're like, no, but if you didn't know that in the National Geographic, there is an article that talks about the Hohokam being the only people who had did shell etching in the world. And that is very significant to us as Akimel O'Odham, because the shell is very important to the people. It is used as a part of, it is used because of its significance and association with the water. We value water so much here, and our name says it, Akimel, which means river, and water is shudat, and the water that flows in the river is what sustained us and our people until it was dammed. And when it was dammed, we didn't leave. We knew the water still existed. We knew the water still ran in the river, and that allowed for the people of Snaketown to live. And I think it was the loss of the water that made them move to where they can have access to the wells that were built by the US government. And so our connection to the shells is so important, but also the other materials. We see that our people today incorporate a lot of the artwork, a lot of the designs into their artwork. And I'm probably promoting Sudhavaki because I currently sit on the foundation board, but it's so important to us in our connections to these places, and Snaketown being one of them, because it still resides within the Gila River Indian Community. And if Snaketown was supposedly uninhabited at the time the archaeologists said they had left, the Gila River Indian Community would not exist today, where we're at, where we were put into a reservation. We probably would be somewhere else. But I strongly believe, that the people were still living there, and that the reservation boundaries included Snaketown, and the archaeologists then, were very, very grateful for the community for allowing them to do excavation work there at Snaketown. And so our community members, all the O'odham people, whether they're from the other 4 O'odham communities, their connection to Snaketown is strong. Their connection to the cultural material is carrying forward, today. So here's another view at Snaketown, and I appreciate your time and patience at the beginning. And should I stop sharing?
You could, yeah, I have a PowerPoint to share here in a minute.
How much time?
How much time do you want? We normally go an hour and a half, but like I told you earlier, we can go longer if you'd like. It's kind of up to you.
We'll start with some questions, so hit me with that.
That sounds great. And before we start sharing our audience questions and comments with Miss Reylynne Williams, I'd like to ask Aldart to give you some information about Old Pueblo's mission and activities. I'll give you some time to drink some water and kind of recenter.
Okay. Thanks again, Megan. You see our mission here on the screen. It's basically to educate both children and adults about archaeology and other cultures. And, an example tonight is, educating people about other cultures, not just about the archaeology. And we're very intent on doing that. We do focus on fostering preservation of archaeological and historical sites and developing a lifelong concern for the importance of non-renewable resources and traditional cultures. So some ways in which we implement our mission here is one way is to conduct educational tours, mostly to archaeological sites. Some of the tours we have coming up, we have one scheduled in July to the University of Arizona's Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill and the Laboratory of Tree Ring Research in Tucson. And in September, on the Equinox Day, I'll be leading a tour to the Los Morteros Hohokam village, which is not nearly as large as Snaketown, by the way, and to the Picture Rocks petroglyph site on the northwestern fringe of Tucson. A little later in September, we're going to be offering a tour led by Denny Seymour and Bill Maples to the Dragoon Springs Stage Station historic site that was a Butterfield Trail stage station that had some interesting history to it, and to the site where the Apache leader Cochise met with Colonel Howard to do a treaty with Cochise's band. And then in December, we'll be leading another tour to Los Morteros, but on that one, instead of going to Picture Rocks, we'll be going to the Signal Hill petroglyph site, which is also the site of 1930s Civilian Conservation Corps architectural features. So it's a very interesting site. And we will be getting some more tours planned here for the coming year. We offer classes and workshops. I'll be teaching 2 online classes later this spring and in the fall. We offer arrowhead making and flint knapping workshops. We still have 2 spaces open in the one coming up on March 29th. So if you're interested in that, please email us or call us to get in on that. The courses that I'll be teaching online are, one is on the Mogollon culture, which is kind of a counterpart of the Hohokam culture, mostly to the east of the Hohokam culture. And these will also be on Wednesday evenings, once a week for 14 sessions. Later on, I will be teaching a class on the Hohokam culture, which is mostly from an archaeological perspective, but I do like to include a lot of indigenous perspectives in my classes as well, and that also will be on Wednesday evenings. We have an online presence. We're about to finish up our next issue of the Old Pueblo Archaeology Bulletin, which really focuses on O'odham culture for this particular issue. So I'm hoping to get that out maybe by the end of the month or very early next month. One of our main features anymore for outreach is to send emails of upcoming activities in archaeology, history, and cultures to anybody who's interested in that. And it's not just Old Pueblo Archaeology Center's activities. It's many organizations contribute their activities to these emails we send out. The one I sent out on Tuesday, I think, ended up being about 29 pages of activities. So a lot of things you can look forward to participating in if you're interested in that. And to get on our emailing list, you can just go to our website, www.oldpueblo.org, or you can send us an email to get your name on the subscribe section. But this is what it looks like on our homepage on the web. Our next Third Thursday Food for Thought program, our guest speaker is going to be Blanca Carrasco of El Paso. She'll be talking about a history of crypto-Judaism in the U.S. Southwest and Mexico from her own Mexican-American perspective. And then we also have a third Thursday program in May with archaeologist Ken Feeder, who's going to be talking about some bogus archaeology. So that should be a pretty entertaining program. Most of what we spend our revenues on, we rely a lot on donations and grants and membership revenues. And most of what we spend that money on is our children's education program. We have a simulated dig set up at our facility here in Tucson, where we bring whole classrooms of kids in to teach them about archaeology and the scientific method and the indigenous cultures of the region. So most of your contributions will go towards that program. So tonight we're kind of figuratively passing the hat here, asking for support for our programs. We'd be happy to have you become members if you're not members already. I know a lot of our members were in tonight. We also accept donations online through our website, or you can call us and make donations with credit card authorizations. And I'll put some email addresses on the screen here or in the chat after I finish my slides here. But it'll look kind of like this without the illustrations. So thanks for listening, and let's get on with the Q&A.
Alrighty, thank you, Al. Okay, Reylynne, I think we'll go ahead and start in the question and answer box. From the first one is from Sally. And she wrote in reference to your first slide of the Akimel and Peeposh woman. And she wrote, is the face of the Akimel O'Odham tattooed or painted? Is the circle on the head of the Peeposh her own hair or another item? And I think that was from your slide from the first.
Reylynne, you can share that slide again if you'd like.
Do I want to go through that again?
Good point.
So that's a good question, and I probably should have explained the two women. So the Akimel O'Odham woman who was painted, she is painted with white clay, and we believe that she may have been coming from a ceremony, or may have been staged, to be photographed as coming from a ceremony. And we know that because during ceremonies, the men and the women are painted with white clay, there is a significance to the pattern on the face. I believe the dots across the forehead indicate the woman is single and of marrying age, probably. And if the O'Odham woman was pictured with dots going, is that vertical? Indicates she is married. So there's a very specific understanding, and that's how I have been told, and others may have been told differently, which is okay, because it could indicate the family or the village they came from, and we always follow the family or the village, traditions. The Peeposh woman, I believe she may have had a like a donut to hold the basket, like the O'Odham women. And we know that the Peeposh women may have used similar things that other O'Odham women used, and I can't recall that what the little round, I think it's like a little round donut, and it's used like a spacer to hold pottery vessels and their baskets on the head.
Right. Usually made out of fibers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And just a couple of comments from the participants' comments on the chat is Bernadette wrote, "I would love to see how the ball game is played." And Carol wrote, "Thank you for the interesting presentation. There is a lot to learn about Snaketown." And going back to the Q&A window, Butch Fairby, he wrote, "Is Snaketown the one National Park Service area of the 22 tribes, I'm assuming the 22 in Arizona, that is not open to the public at large? If so, do you know why this is?"
Yeah, and it is one of the national monuments that is not accessible to the public. As I stated before, it was a community decision not to allow for visitation and access to. There is a right of entry permit to access, have access into the community. And it's up to the community council whether to grant access. And I do want to reiterate that the YouTube videos of people going out to Snaketown did not have permission from the community to go visit Snaketown. So they all have illegally trespassed onto the community.
Sharing that really important information. Back to the chat window, Sherry wrote, "Reylynne, very interesting talk. Are you related to the Williams men who helped with the excavation?"
To answer that, I am not. So I'll just speak on behalf of my family last name. The Williams last name is from my grandfather. My grandfather, he is a community member. However, he is he is half Navajo and half Yavapai Apache from Camp Verde. But he was an enrolled member of the Gila River Indian Community, and so his last name was a given last name by the Bureau and Bureau of Indian Affairs, and if he was given his father's last name, it would have been something different. So we're not always related by last name.
Very, very true. Okay. And Tom Wright wrote, "Thank you, Reylynne. Question, has the ball court been stabilized so that the excavated portion won't continue to erode?"
Thanks for that question, Tom. No, there is no current stabilization work on the ball court. It has been left to weather the storms and the environment. And as I stated before, that it's within our traditional culture that things, that these places naturally go back to the earth. And if it was something the community is interested in, then we may pursue that. But in the meantime, it is going back to the natural environment.
Okay. And just to kind of continue on with, there's a lot of interest in the questions about the ball court that were mentioned in the video, and as you were describing some of the excavations and the history. But could you talk a little bit more about like the ball court in terms of the games the men played, if any, or if to your knowledge, as well as maybe more in the I guess more explanation of what the ball court was used for, you know. Some
Yeah.
people, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So the men's ball games, I'm assuming, one of them could have been the Shangaball. It's a current O'odham men's game, and I cannot speak to any of the men's games because women are not allowed to participate in those men games. I know, but I can't tell you. No. If there's a talk on the men's traditional games, that would be more appropriate. But for this presentation, I should not be talking about the men's traditional games other than just knowing the name of it. I would kind of put a good I think there could have been a lot of gambling games. There are some O'odham gambling games that both men and women can play, and or only men and only women can play. And some of these gambling games are being revitalized in the O'odham communities today, and part of, the New Year, the O'odham New Year, which is celebrated in June, with the ripening of the bailich, of the saguaro fruit. And so, betting games, DACA could be one of them too, which, and, traditional dances, whether it's for social or ceremonial. We know that in O'odham culture, that the winter stories are only told in the wintertime. And, depending how cold it got, right? The environment today is so different than it was during our ancestors' time. So I don't think a lot of winter activities happen, that they mainly, I know that if an elder were to tell the creation stories, which took 4 days, 4 nights, maybe some of that storytelling was inside homes. But we can only speculate, right? Yeah, that's all I think so far.
Right on. Thank you. I have played DACA too, and oh my gosh, I lived to tell the tale.
Yeah.
So,
It's a lot of fun.
yeah. And going back to the participants' questions, is Snaketown and this is from Beth. Is Snaketown a translation of the O'odham name for the community? Are many of the English names for the Gila River translations of O'odham? And finally, where did the artifacts gathered at Snaketown go?
So I know that the artifacts were all curated at the Arizona State Museum until, my gosh,
It was late 1980s, wasn't it? When they started
yeah,
transferring.
well, yeah, I believe so, but I know that recently the Snaketown collection is now being curated at the Hohokam Heritage Center in the Gila River Indian Community. And that was before I started there. I used to work for the Hohokam Heritage Center in 2007. And the collection was already there. And I just remember stories that some of the museum staff had when they were part of the transfer, you know, and so that's where the collection is. And I believe some of that collection may be on exhibit now there at the Hohokam Heritage Center. The O'odham name for Snaketown, I don't know it. And I know in the video the narrator does try to pronounce it, but I couldn't say it myself, and I didn't want to get it wrong. So
Reylynne, I believe in Howry's book, it talks about the translation of the name was place of the snakes.
yeah,
If you could translate that into O'odham, it might be close.
yeah, and so I don't know the O'odham translation. Sorry. But some of the English names, so some of them are, let's see, the English names for the O'odham communities. I think it's just basic, translation. But the villages in the community still go by their, some still go by their O'odham names. Like my village, the name is Chichino, which if you were translated, it's those who look like Chinese. But it's only because the people had thought that the people that lived in the village looked like Chinese people working in the fields with their straw hats and long hair. But the English name is the cooperative colony, the co-op colony for short, just because the family here, always farmed together and collectively.
I like that. I like that. That's great. Okay, so Sally wrote, you mentioned governors in modern times. Is there an overall leader? What type of government does the nation have?
So I know that today, because of the community's constitution designating the leadership, governor, lieutenant governor, and the community council, it was my understanding that in the olden times there wasn't like one leader. Like each village had a an individual that they wanted to speak on behalf of the community or on behalf of the village, and they all gathered together. And even before, like, there was a democratic process in the community that the people would the leaders were volunteered, you know, to be the leader for the community, to speak on behalf of the community. Like Chief Antonio Azul, he was one of the last chiefs of the community, but he was appointed by the people to speak for them when it came to negotiate water rights, you know, or rights of the community during that time. And so people were volunteered or maybe voluntold. But you know, it's the faith of the people that put our leaders in these positions, you know.
That's right. Okay, how are you feeling? Are you feeling good, or would you like to kind of wind down?
I think it's time to wind down.
Sure.
Yeah.
I totally understand, and just thank you so much from me. Personally, I think I've learned so much in just this time frame, and what we were, what you're able to give us tonight is a lot. And I'm from the O'odham, but I have Hajun or family relatives from Gila River, and I think that the more we have these educational exchanges, the more we strengthen our bond and continue on in remembering and acknowledging and taking personal ownership of our relations, our family ties, and how strong they still are, how important and how educated and well-rounded the people are to this day,
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me of that. you
Yeah.
know. So with that, I will move forward, and on behalf of Old Pueblo's Archaeology Center, I'd like to thank you again, Reylynne, for sharing with us this evening. We also thank you all in our audience for joining us tonight. Please consider making a donation to support Old Pueblo's efforts to educate children and adults about archaeology, history, and cultures, including through programs like this one. Thank you all, and good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reylynne. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Be safe.
Have a good night, everybody.